People who knew a pathological liar, what's the most insane BS they've come up with? Where to even begin? A former friend is an undiagnosed pathological liar, and I believe she also has factitious disorder. As a child, she did have a rare form of cancer. In many ways, I think she associated the illness with a time when she received an outpouring of care, love, and support. After her recovery, that's when a lot of the lying began. Long story short, she claims to have graduated from an Ivy League college, despite having no college degree and never being accepted into the institution. She had been accepted on a study abroad trip from the college while in high school because her father was friends with the professor. After the birth of her third child, she pretended to have cancer again. She took money and resources from people and had them praying for her. She was lying to her husband, her family, everyone, going to doctor appointments and chemo, even traveling to another state for treatment. Ultimately, her father caught her in the lie after demanding to see medical records. She attempted to forge documents but did not succeed. She was never held accountable for the lies. Now she's apparently a renowned chef and dedicated mentor, despite having zero culinary training. Her lies are so pervasive, from the mundane to the most significant things. Seeing her social media is like looking at an alternative reality that doesn't exist. She uses extreme filters and photo editing. It doesn't even look like her. Not to mention, it's all narcissistic lies. Her family enables her, and there has never been any accountability. I went full no contact and feel better for it. Story 2. That would be my mom. One of my favorite tall tales she told, this one she shared with a few friends, was about when she arrived in Los Angeles. She was walking on Sunset Boulevard when a limo pulled up right next to her, and inside was Rick James. This was super freak Rick James, not fresh out of jail Rick James. She said she immediately got in and later told the story about how Rick would do drugs in the limo. According to her, they both got extremely messed up on drugs and expensive champagne, and Rick was looking for a pretty thing to party with that weekend. She claimed he threw her a few $100s to party with, and she spent the entire weekend partying with Rick James. Now, it was fairly common for Rick James to throw parties where booze and drugs flowed like water, but my mom was also a known pathological liar and loved spinning tall tales. She once claimed to be an acquaintance of Barbara Richardson, the woman killed in the Wonderland massacre in the 1980s. I remember asking her how she knew Barbara. She went quiet and immediately changed the subject, saying, "Don't worry about it." She would lie about simple things just to make herself look good, and most of what she did was hard to verify. So when she claimed she partied with Rick James or knew a homicide victim in one of LA's most notorious murders, I always called bullcrap. She lied so much that if she told you the sky was blue, you'd have to look up and check for yourself. Story 3. When I was in high school, there was a girl who claimed she was rich. While her appearance suggested otherwise, she told people her father owned a company. When someone asked who was dropping her off that morning and why she wasn't using her car, she said it was her personal chauffeur and that her car was currently in the shop. One time, she missed school for a week and came back with a brand new iPhone 4 from her 30-something boyfriend. She was 16 at the time. She threw a big 17th birthday party and invited her closest friends. When they asked where her parents were, she said they were on a business trip, so her chauffeur and her maid were helping her out. I guess some of her friends who had been suspicious of her got tired of it, so they decided to follow her home. When they saw her enter a house in a slum area, she told them it was her maid's house, and that her parents made her live there to understand how hard life is in poverty. Her entire facade finally came crashing down when the principal called her, because her private pictures had been leaked by her boyfriend, another student at the same school, and her chauffeur and maid even came to the school. I kind of pitied her back then. I guess she was just trying to fit in. Still, that story was wild. Story 4. They lied about not being able to afford heat in their home, even though they lived on a mountain in a ski town, to hoard all the child support that was supposed to go toward a child in their care. They didn't tell anyone, even though they were receiving money from family to help out. Then they claimed to be battling cancer, but didn't tell anyone for weeks. It took over 3 months for their diagnosis, which coincidentally happened the same day I finally asked if she had any results. It turned out to be a LEEP procedure for abnormal cells, not chemo or anything serious. Yet despite all that, she treated herself to a solo Hawaiian vacation before receiving this so-called diagnosis, all while crying poor. Too poor to heat their far north mountainside home, except for, wait for it, her room. When confronted, she kicked the child out on the street, literally bagging up their belongings and leaving them on the side of the road in the rain. That's when the penny dropped for me. This person had been lying about everything their entire life. My life has been amazing since I cut them out, like night and day. I wish I had done it 15 years ago. I have never been this happy and carefree, and now I know a lot about narcissists and psychopaths. Story 5. Hold on. Let me tell you about my brother. I can barely remember all this stuff. It's been going on for 20 years. He finished high school as a normal kid, slightly introverted, but very popular. He went to university out of town and moved out at our parents' expense. He immediately dropped out and started dealing drugs while being supported by our parents. He continued to lie about it for many years. He lied that he got a job as a radio presenter. Our parents even rented him an apartment in the new area. He also lied that he was a shareholder in a music events company. They gave him tens of thousands of dollars for it. He went to the pub and told everyone he had brain cancer, passed the hat around, and collected cash. He has robbed every single person he knows. Can I borrow $500? And still lies daily. There are so many more things on the scale of what I just said that I can't even remember them all. He lied about his friend being murdered instead of it being a self-harm. He lied that the Russian mafia was onto him and needed $20,000 to bail him out. He lies about where he is, what he is doing, what he has done, where he got something, how much it cost. He literally cannot tell the truth. He just has to lie. I called him out from day one. Something just didn't feel right. My parents called me a cop and said I was being a bitch to him, but I was right. I was always right. He made my life hell. I do really well financially, but my credit is ruined because of his fraud. He broke into my house and robbed me so many times. He takes small things, tiny things, like the bell off my bicycle, and he takes big things, like my safe with cash in it. I hate him. I've punished him with violence, which isn't appropriate, but someone needed to teach him a lesson since no one ever has. And of course, he went to the cops. The moment he's in trouble, he runs to them and causes drama for everyone else. He has no friends, never worked, no passion, nothing. He would be better off gone. Story 6. I knew someone who was a pathological liar. They were also a serial one-upper. If someone had one of something, they had two. We had a coworker who called in sick with the flu, and our supervisor gave them the day off. Leo, the liar, as I'll call them here, was already at work and overheard the other employee calling out. Leo thought it would be an opportune time to leave work sick with the flu as well. Leo claimed that he had worked around the employee who had called in sick on their previous shift and now felt he was coming down with the flu too. He said he had caught it from our coworker who was out sick that day. Our supervisor rolled his eyes and said, "Fine, go home, but don't come back without a doctor's note." Leo the liar left work hesitantly. It turned out that the coworker who had called in sick with the flu had actually gone out the night before and was just hungover. They never had the flu. Leo the liar had to go to a walk-in clinic and waste money seeing a doctor just to get a note, all because he couldn't help himself from lying. He went to the doctor, lost a day of sick time, and had to pay out of pocket to be seen. When he came back to work, he acted as if he was recovering from the flu we all knew he never had. No one told him we knew the truth. We just found it funny how far he went to play up being sick from a coworker who never actually had the flu. Story 7. This guy I knew in college was the worst liar. Here are a couple of great stories. He used to claim he was a bouncer at a strip club. He was 18. He also said he was so good at karate that his parents sent him to Japan to finish his training. One day, we were sitting in a dorm lounge, and he opened his wallet and took out a throwing star. He then told a story about being at the club where a guy was harassing a dancer. According to him, he took out his throwing star and threw it, hitting the guy right behind the ear. I gave him an cool, and asked if I could hold the star. He handed it to me, and having never touched a throwing star in my life, I flicked it at the wall, and it stuck. Pretty much exactly where I aimed. Cool, he said. Then he took it out of the wall, gave it a flick, and it ping-ting thumped off 3 walls and fell flat on the floor. Right behind his ear, you say? Another time it was a break, and he lived near me, so I caught a ride from college to our hometown. The plan was to chill at his parents' house until my dad got off work, then he would come get me. This guy had been bragging for months that he owned a 1977 Corvette and that he just drove the 1982 Lincoln because it was better in the snow or something. When I got to his house, his parents were at work, but sure enough, in the garage was a gorgeous white 1977 Corvette. It was a clear day, and we were going to meet my dad later at the mall parking lot. I immediately started pressuring him to take the vet to the mall. Excuses. But I didn't let up. Eventually, he gave in, and I could tell he was putting on a brave face because that was absolutely his dad's Corvette, and he was not supposed to touch it. He had lied himself into this corner. Okay, maybe with a little pushing from me. We took it to the mall, I met my dad, nothing happened. But I'm positive he got in some trouble for it. Heh, I Ferris Buellered him. Story 8. A new girl started at work in our boring little office job and began telling people about her family, who supposedly all had amazing, interesting jobs. At first, it started out semi-realistic. Her uncle supposedly worked as a stylist at Gucci. She would tell us all the most scandalous stories he had supposedly shared with her, but she added so much detail that even he couldn't realistically have known. Celebrities cheating on their partners with photographers, their partners finding out but agreeing never to make it public. Whatever. People exaggerate. But then, her mother supposedly used to work for Parliament, and the stories escalated. People openly doing it in the House of Commons, and her mother once doing it with a married MP in an office in Parliament. Then, her sister's husband was supposedly a top chef who worked as a private chef for celebrities. He allegedly witnessed all kinds of scandals while working on their private jets. He had even convinced a celebrity to let him use their jet to fly his whole family to Capri. Then, her partner's brother was supposedly a surgeon who performed open-heart surgery on the motorway on a woman they came across after a car accident. The brother dated the woman briefly afterward, but she cheated on him with a fireman. Depending on who my colleague told, the fireman was either the one who cut the woman free from the car or just a random fireman. It just went on and on. It was like she was testing how many oohs and ahs she could get from people. It was exhausting. She'd mention these amazing jobs for a few months, and when people got bored of cooking or surgery stories, she'd switch it up. It all came to a head when she lost track of her mother's alleged role at Parliament and told someone a story she had already shared. But this time, she told it differently. From then on, whenever she told a story, people just ignored her. She eventually moved teams, and from what we hear, her mother now supposedly works for the House of Lords, not the House of Commons. Story 9. My mom has gotten to the point where she genuinely believes her own BS. The most recent example was yesterday. Without my knowledge, she apparently told our whole family that we had to leave Thanksgiving early because I had to go to my boyfriend's family's Thanksgiving. So yesterday, she asked me what time I was leaving. I asked what she was talking about, and she said, "You're leaving to go to boyfriend's house." I told her I never said that, and she proceeded to argue with me. Eventually, I said, "I have no plans to drive a quick 9 hours to visit his grandma at the nursing home. He had gone out of state to visit her for Thanksgiving." Even then, she continued to argue that I must have said something, because why else would she think that? Because you're a pathological liar, and it was one of the lies you told to get out of spending time with your family. Story 10. I knew a guy who claimed he used to be a paramedic before switching careers. He had endless stories, car wrecks, overdose saves, chaotic ER nights, all super detailed. Everyone believed him for years. One day at a party, someone had a medical emergency. People immediately turned to him like, "You're a medic, what do we do?" He panicked, completely froze, started Googling symptoms. Someone quietly pulled me aside and said, "I thought you knew. He dropped out of EMT school in the first week." Turns out every story he told came from Grey's Anatomy, Reddit threads, and news articles. He had just stitched them together over time. The wildest part, even after being exposed, he kept telling the stories, just changing the endings. Story 11. First, she had cancer, which supposedly made her infertile because they removed her ovaries. Then she got pregnant with a miracle baby, but lost it after failing to convince my brother to marry her. Then came cancer, again, terminal this time. Then another pregnancy, another miracle baby. Lost that one too, tragically. This was supposedly especially devastating because she claimed the 4-week-old fetus waved at her on the doctor's camera. A 4-week-old clump of cells waved, and that's just a tiny slice of the crazy she's constantly serving. Story 12. To preface, my brother has antisocial personality disorder. When people hear that, they often think psychopath, but it's a whole spectrum. Some adjust better than others. On that spectrum, my brother is a solid sociopath. On to the story. I found out in 2020 that I had thyroid cancer. Now, thyroid cancer is the one you want if you were ever going to get cancer because it's highly treatable, especially when caught early, like mine. Still, I was shaken, living in a different state, away from all my family in the middle of COVID. A few days after getting a treatment plan in place, I call my brother to tell him I have news. He asks what's going on, and I say I have cancer. He goes, "Oh, that sucks. Me too." I panic and ask what type. He tells me it's pancreatic cancer from his brief stint in basic training with the Coast Guard before he got kicked out. He launches into an elaborate story about being exposed to lead and other hazards, describes the lesions, his prognosis, his treatment plan, everything. I'm upset and genuinely think my brother is facing a horrible death. I ask a bunch of questions and finally he says, "Enough about me. Tell me about yours." So I tell him it's thyroid cancer. They're definitely going to remove the left side along with the lymph nodes. If it's spread further, they'll remove the whole thyroid and surrounding lymph nodes and follow up with iodine treatment. He says at least it's the good cancer. So I go off on this cancer adventure. I've just had the surgery and am recovering when I get a call from his now ex-wife. She tells me he's been cheating on her with a girl he lied to about having cancer. Apparently, he spun the same sob story he told me about pancreatic cancer from the Coast Guard to get with her. He doesn't even confess to me that it was all a lie. I call him and tell him I won't forgive him for such a cruel deception while I was dealing with actual cancer. Story 13. I worked with a guy who told me he had to get clearance from the president whenever he wanted to travel outside the country. He claimed it was because he held state secrets from his time in the military and they needed to make sure he wasn't doing any wet work abroad. Keep in mind, he was in his late 50s, horribly out of shape, and, according to his brother, had never been in the military, paramilitary, or even civilian intelligence. I used to one-up his stories, just to see how far he would take them. I secretly hoped he'd eventually claim he was an astronaut. Story 14. I went to school with a girl who was a pathological liar. I'm not sure exactly what disorder she had, but she claimed she had a record deal, sang on stage with Ariana Grande, was in some kind of ballet fight club that she snuck out to every night, ran so fast in gym class that she had a heart attack and an ambulance was called, was kidnapped and held for ransom. Alternated between claiming she was a virgin and claiming to have had relation with hundreds of guys. The first two are especially interesting, considering she tried out for the school musical and was rejected because her singing voice was bad. Last I heard, she dropped out, got pregnant, and the baby's father has full custody. He has been unsuccessfully attempting to track her down for child support. I'm glad she has no relationship with that child. Story 15. I've always been a car guy. When I was about 16, anytime I saw a cool car, I'd tell my group of friends and we'd discuss cars in general. One kid would always claim he saw that car weeks or months earlier, often adding that he or his older brother knew the owner and got to drive it. Eventually, I started making up models that didn't exist. I saw the new Honda Jensen yesterday. It had a pearl coat on the paint job. Without hesitation, this kid would chime in, "My homie's mom just got one. She let me drive it to the store. That thing is fast." After it happened twice, I let the rest of the group in on the secret. From then on, no one really treated the liar the same way again. Story 16. I knew a guy in high school who was a manager at the McDonald's I worked at. I've never encountered someone like him before or since. Everything you had done, he had done too, and better. His stories were always more interesting, at least according to him. And the longer you let him talk, the more famous people he somehow involved. The one I remember most involved weightlifting. I don't lift, and never really have, but there was a kid working there I also went to school with who was an absolute brick house, about 5'10", and probably 250 to 275 pounds. His arms were the size of my legs. He mentioned something about a new personal record on his bench press, and I was being appropriately congratulatory. I knew he'd worked hard and he was a nice guy, though we weren't friends. Up walks Mr. Manager, all 5'6" and 110 pounds of him, and starts going off about how much he could lift, completely ignoring proper technique. Weightlifting guy listened for a few minutes, then broke it to him that the world record was less than what he was claiming, and if he tried it the way he was describing, he'd at most herniate his intestines through his a-hole, which probably won't be a problem considering how full of crap you are. Mic drop moment. Manager walked off, leaving me with the fabulous lifter, who of course started in about how he couldn't really lift like he used to, but a lot of people had seen him at the time, etc. I just stared at him until he told me to go get more oil for the fryer. Lol. Story 17. A former childhood friend and roommate for 11 months in our mid to late 20s. This whole thing was insane. Besides strongly believing he might be an actual narcissist, he was 100% a pathological liar. One of the most ridiculous things he lied about was his high school days. According to him, he was this huge bully that everyone feared and had slept with all these girls who wouldn't have even looked at him. He would go on and on about his glory days, beating up dudes, stealing their girlfriends, and all these massive fights he supposedly won. I went to high school with him. It was all bullcrap. He cared way too much about fitting in and was a big people pleaser. I don't think he got into a single fight in high school. None of it happened. For a 28-year-old, it was bizarre. The most messed up part, though, is that he has a son. This kid was 8 years old, and he would tell him all these lies and actually encouraged him to be a bully at school. The kid got into trouble for picking on others and pushing them around, and this former friend was proud. That's my boy, just like his father, an alpha. Story 18. I've got 2 stories. When I was 14, I talked to a guy who was 36. His story. I'm a poor little thing who struggled in school, then I got falsely framed by my drug-abusing college roommate. I never did drugs before, but now I'm poor and can't keep a job or buy a house. I blocked and reported him because he was talking to me, a 14-year-old, but I didn't think much of the story at the time. After I turned 18, I got in touch with one of his other exes who was his age. It turns out he would make up or twist stories and play the victim to financially exploit women. He'd move in, never pay bills or get a job, and spend his days getting high or drunk. Women who tried to kick him out would receive death or self-harm threats. Story 19. OMG, so many. At age 9, she convinced a bunch of people that we were having a summer fair in our front garden, a space barely big enough to hold a small car. My parents found out when people started showing up with stuff, ready to set up. At age 11, my mom spoke to her teacher after finding a strange goodbye note in her rucksack. It turned out she had told everyone she was leaving for boarding school after the Easter holidays. At age 15, she convinced my parents that she didn't have to attend school on Fridays for almost a full school year. She's successful in her industry and has managed to talk people into hiring her wildly underqualified friends, most of which ended in disaster. About 10 years ago, she had my ex-boyfriend drive me 40 miles home on Christmas Day through an actual hurricane with flooding, claiming the house was flooded. The house was not flooded, and my boyfriend was absolutely furious. That drive was genuinely dangerous. It's crazy that she still does stuff like this. She's almost 45 now. Story 20. I moderate chat rooms at night when I'm bored, so I often see people making up stories because they desperately want to be someone else. One particular fellow pops in now and then, and his lies are obviously fake. Last night, he showed up and heard another person talking about being diagnosed with lung cancer. The pathological liar immediately cut him off and started talking about his own stage 4 lung cancer that he cured by eating healthy and refusing treatment. He even encouraged this man to neglect chemo and do the same. Needless to say, he was removed from the room. Not only did he attack this man, but he also gave him false hope and dangerous advice. Story 21. A girl I was loosely friends with in high school. Her uncle, or someone in Ireland, had died and left her millions at a mansion, but for some complicated reason, she was still living in a council flat in Essex with no money. Of course, all her school holidays were spent in Ireland at her mansion. She claimed to have written a best-selling book under a secret name, though she wouldn't tell anyone the title or her pseudonym because she didn't want the fame. She also claimed to be having a secret affair with a male teacher, complete with falsified text messages and emails. She secretly had a baby, somehow hiding her pregnancy, and conveniently gave birth during the summer holidays. The baby was given up for adoption. Things really escalated when she went to university. She became obsessed with a female tutor, fabricating an entire scenario where they were having an affair. She then created social media accounts impersonating the tutor to make her story believable. She got carried away and used the accounts to catfish other people. She was eventually caught, kicked out of university, and I believe legal action was taken against her. Story 22. I knew someone who had done a single ride-along with an EMS crew as part of her training for something else. I don't remember what, but it wasn't medical. She claimed that during this ride-along, they picked up a woman in active labor, took her to the hospital, and then had to wait so long for a room that she caught the baby in the waiting room, and when the nurses came in, handed it to them, grinning like, "All done." Anyone who has done any EMS work, or even worked in a hospital, immediately knows this is complete nonsense. The level of nope, that's not a thing in her story is insane. The funny part? She told me this at dinner, fully aware that I had been a paramedic for years and would instantly know she was lying. Absolutely wild. Story 23. I dated a guy who constantly told the most ridiculous lies in the most natural way, as if he actually believed them himself. The lies were never malicious or manipulative, so I just accepted it as a slightly amusing quirk. First, he told me he was an NHL player. He worked at McDonald's, full-time, in England. Then he pointed out a brand new model of car that had just come out and said he was going to buy one for his dad's birthday. Good luck doing that on your McDonald's wages, fella. He claimed to be a model for Yves Saint Laurent. Now, don't get me wrong, he had a very handsome face, but he was 5'6". YSL wouldn't have taken that. And he said he was a semi-pro boxer. Okay, I can't prove he wasn't, but I knew him for a couple of years and he never had a fight in that time. My favorite, though, was that he claimed to play for one of the top non-league football clubs in England. The club he mentioned was full-time, meaning their players were employed there as their main job. The club was 100 miles away from the town we lived in and worked at McDonald's. Crucially, this football club was in the same division as the team I support, and I go to all of their home and away matches. That season, we were coincidentally drawn against them in 2 different cup competitions, one of which ended in a draw and required a replay. In total, we played each other 5 times that season. Guess who didn't feature in the squad? When I asked him about this, because I was curious how he'd wriggle out of it, he said he had been injured, but was now recovered. The team just wouldn't pick him because he was so good he'd upset the other players. He didn't say it exactly like that, but that was definitely the implication. Then I asked what position he played. Apparently, he was not only their star striker, but also their best goalkeeper, all 5'6" of him. So I did what felt natural in that situation. I challenged him to a penalty shootout, professional striker and goalkeeper, against a 5-foot-tall teenage girl. I beat him 15-0. Story 24. He was just so wildly insecure that he had to know everything and be the best at everything. Everything, all the time. Some other friends talk about the time he insisted he was really good at soccer, and apparently the pickup game went hilariously badly. But the one that really cracked me up was his obsession with languages. He constantly insisted he spoke tons of them. He had done years of German in school, but could only say Gesundheit. His biggest brag, though, was that he was pretty fluent in Latin. That's hard to check. Nobody speaks Latin. One night at dinner, someone said, "Oh, you read Latin? What does this say?" and showed him a piece of jewelry that read Dux Femina Facti. He hemmed and hawed, claiming the grammar makes it hard to translate exactly. Something about the Duke's wife and facti? His factotum, maybe? I have some familiarity with Latin because I studied theology, so I could half stumble through churchy Latin just from seeing it often, and I knew a handful of famous quotes. I said, "It means a woman was the author of these deeds." Everyone looked at me like I had 2 heads, and I added defensively, "It's in the Aeneid. It's about Dido. It's like a favorite feminist quote. Google it." I literally thought this dude was going to murder me. He was absolutely seething with rage. I honestly thought my feat was no more impressive than knowing NASA's motto is, "To the stars through adversity." It's just one of those bits of Latin a lot of people have memorized. I can't tell you anything about the grammar or construct a sentence. Story 25. I had a boss like this. Her dad must have been a cat because we heard at least 9 different stories about how he died. We also heard multiple conflicting stories about her childhood. She told us she was in her mid-40s. Then it became her early 40s. Eventually, we heard she was in her late 30s. I Googled her at one point and found out she was actually in her mid-50s. She claimed she played Trivial Pursuit with Donald Trump once. She said she flew on a plane with Al Pacino. The very first time I met her, she told me her husband worked for Robot Chicken, and that Guillermo del Toro and Seth Green had been at her rural Midwestern house that weekend doing something for the show. She also claimed she was Native American and had this whole persona built around it. As far as I could tell, she was actually just a basic white woman from the Midwest pretending to be Native. I can't even remember all her stories at this point, and some of them I don't want to share on the public internet. But she was a total lying con artist. She didn't even do her job. It was all smoke and mirrors. And we've spent years uncovering and cleaning up the messes she left behind. Story 26. He said he had Parkinson's disease, so he couldn't carry food trays to tables at work. He claimed he used to go heli-skiing in Alaska every year. He also said his ex cheated on him with a member of the band Daughtry and then became one of their groupies. Naturally, he hated that band. And every time one of their songs came on, he made us change it. He was dating a coworker and claimed he had bought them a vacation to Mexico in 2 months. The night before the flight, while she was packing, she had doubts. He swore up and down that they were going. The next morning, before leaving for the airport, he came clean. There was never a trip to Mexico. She left him, and he quit working with all of us. Story 27. My parents used to live next door to one of these types. My brother said he claimed to be a major airline pilot, then an investment banker, then a medical doctor. The thing is, over a 7 to 8 year span, he said he was in medical school full-time, somehow not realizing that most medical schools in the area are 4 years and never moving on to anything else. Eventually, his fiancée got sick of his nonsense after an incident where he was pulled over by police for highway street racing and lost both his car and license. Within the next 3 months, they moved out, sold the house, and went their separate ways. Story 28. There was a guy in an adjacent unit of mine in the Army who just would not stop lying about having CIA qualifications and credentials, even when it was explained to him that all his claims could be easily verified, that there's literally no position that would be hidden or redacted from his commander, and that he wouldn't be anywhere near his rank or position if he even qualified to attempt a CIA role. He still kept lying. Even Delta operators have that stuff clearly visible on their records brief. His lieutenant eventually got on his case, saying that if he told one more lie, he would face legal consequences. After the reprimand, the guy muttered something like, "But they erased all my records," or something equally ridiculous. The lieutenant heard him and pursued legal action. Fortunately, that was the last I ever heard about him. Story 29. My stepdaughter, Dee, sadly inherited mental health issues from her mother's side. In high school, Dee announced in class that she had been accepted to a prestigious university. She was only a junior with a 2.0 GPA at the time. She claimed to have lupus, even researching and finding the name of a local specialist, saying he was her doctor. That doctor was also her aunt's physician. Her aunt actually has lupus. When the aunt asked the office manager if Dee was a patient there, the answer was no. She claimed to have breast cancer at age 20. She told us her mom had allowed her to travel to Samoa with a friend, except she didn't have a passport. She lied about having auto insurance for 9 months. She told people her dad had died of brain cancer. He is alive and has never had cancer. She got pregnant and claimed to be receiving prenatal care. She even named a specific OB/GYN and knew where their office was. A relative insisted on accompanying her to her next appointment, and they went all the way to the reception desk before Dee admitted she wasn't a patient there. Story 30. I was friends with someone for 20 years before we dated, and it became hell very quickly. I mentioned her sister, who had supposedly passed away when she was much younger, and her face went completely blank, like it didn't ring a bell at all. She had forgotten that she had lied to me about a dead sibling to garner sympathy. This was just one of many, many messed up lies and bizarre narratives she was constantly making up. On another note, she would try lying to me about our own life together. It was bizarre. Once, she said, "My family keeps wondering why I'm paying all these bills here and not getting to use the space I need." And I had to blink. She paid zero toward any bills, utilities, internet, nothing. And at that point had barely paid any rent for months either. She was making me foot the bills while telling her family otherwise and trying to use that against me as if I wasn't aware. It was so weird. She even told me I was denying her experience with facts, LOL. I wish I were making this up. I actually have that one recorded. Anyway, liars are creepy as heck, and they inevitably forget their own lies. It would be funnier if she weren't so harmful. Story 31. A new guy came to work in our office as a co-op student. He was a little older than our standard co-op student, but he said he had decided to change careers. He claimed he had previously been a firefighter, a private detective, and a whole bunch of other things. He also said he and his wife were currently running a group home for foster children and caring for 10 kids. He told us he was 35. I believed every single thing he said because I don't expect people to lie for no reason. Well, I can't remember exactly how it all went down, but some of the guys in the office did a little digging and found out that all of it was BS. Not to mention, he was actually 40, not 35. The guys would deliberately bait him into lying. One of them said a friend got a chance to ride in a certain type of race car. They made up the type, and of course, he claimed he'd driven it. For his birthday, they ordered a cake that said, "Happy 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40th birthday." They also told him the jig was up and that they knew he was a big fat liar. He didn't last long in our office and probably left to pilot the space shuttle. Story 32. I had an old neighbor who made things up all the time. For context, we had moved to a brand new housing development, and after all the work was finished and the lawns had grown, my dad took the initiative to get all the neighbors together to put up fences. He had a friend who owned a fencing company, did all the math, and figured out how much everyone would owe. He even ate the difference when he realized he'd made some mistakes with the calculations. One of our neighbors, Ray, was always full of lies, dumb stuff. He claimed they used to own a restaurant, that he had been a paramedic, that he made his money selling sports cards and so on. One day, months after the fences went up, Ray mentioned to my dad that Tom, my dad's friend who did the fences, had gone through a tough time from his divorce and that Ray had let him sleep on his couch for about a month and a half. Tom had been divorced, but he hadn't done that. My dad knew it was a crock of crap and called Tom, asking playfully where he got the nerve to live 3 doors up from us for over a month and to never stop by. Tom was so utterly confused by the story that the only thing he could say was, "Who the hell is Ray?" Story 33. I've known a couple of people like this. In high school, I had a friend who reused Dane Cook bits as his own stories. He also claimed to have gone to an orgy but didn't participate. He just peeked at other people. He said he drank 4 Red Bulls, chased down a car, and ripped the door off. He even started telling people at work that we were dating, even though I was already out as a lesbian. Then I had a roommate who was another compulsive liar. She claimed to have cancer but never seemed to need treatment. She said she had been a model but had no pictures of herself. She claimed to have been in an arranged marriage due to family ties to the mob and a Native American crime ring. For the longest time, I assumed she was lying about having a daughter, but no. Turns out she was just a really bad mom, and her daughter lived with her parents. In the 2 to 3 years we were roommates, I think I heard her talking to her daughter twice on the phone. Her daughter was about 6. My favorite was that she claimed to have written a song for the Pretty Reckless, but she couldn't find it because, she said, the band changed so much of it and she didn't remember the name. Story 34. I knew a guy like this, but he couldn't even keep his lies straight when talking to the same person. He claimed he owned a nightclub, but that his business partners had sold it out from under him. Then he said his girlfriend had taken it somehow. Then it became a strip club. The name changed a little with every iteration. Everyone in that friend group just got used to him lying about everything all the time for no reason. As long as his lies didn't have any real-world impact, people just let it slide and treated everything he said as works of fiction. Until he started saying things he couldn't backtrack on. His family got sick of it and eventually kicked him to the curb. He died homeless and alone because he ultimately ended up alienating everyone. Story 35. I know a guy who once wanted to prove he was a better driver than everyone else by intentionally driving drunk. We didn't have anywhere to be. We were safe at home. He got in his car shockingly fast. It was late at night, so no one else was around to stop him. I stood in front of his car in my underwear and bare feet. He inched forward, so I stepped up on his hood. He looked me in the face, smiled, and pressed the gas pedal. It was a sedan, so I was able to roll off the back with minimal bruising and bleeding. No bones broken. He went off on a joyride, didn't get caught, and when he got back, his car bumper had marks on it. He remembered none of it the next day and denied everything. Don't talk to my brother anymore. Story 36. My former friend would make up stories a lot for the 2 guys in the group who were actually landing dates with women, and they would relay them back to us. The stories were always about all the banging he was supposedly having. He once claimed that, before the start of class, he saw a girl he thought was attractive, marched right up to her, and started making out with her. Her boyfriend was sitting next to her, and according to my former friend, he just allowed it to happen. Another friend was also in that class and witnessed what actually happened. He had marched up to her and attempted to kiss her, but she rejected him. Her boyfriend ended up punching him in the face. Another time, he claimed that he saw a girl who had just been dumped and seduced her into doing it with him. I had known him for years at that point, and there was zero chance he had seduced anyone. He had a very off-putting personality and often described himself as not being the romantic type. He was also starting to fall down the incel rabbit hole at that point and had some really awful views on women. Add to that the first story being completely debunked. And what I think actually happened is that he tried to weasel his way into a clearly distraught woman's pants, failed miserably, and got told off. Story 37. My ex-stepfather was like this. When we moved to Southern California, he was constantly on the lookout for famous people. Never mind that we lived in Fontana, not Los Angeles. One day, he and I were sitting in the car while my mom ran into a store. A fairly nice car drove past and he suddenly perked up. "Hey, did you see that blonde in that car? It had a vanity plate. I think it started with an A. It must be Angie Dickinson." From that moment on, he kept retelling and embellishing his story about seeing Angie Dickinson cruising around Fontana. It was interesting, but also hilarious watching how his delusions unfolded. At least, that one was harmless. Story 38. I grew up with one, my identical twin. Their lies were always believed. I would get blamed for everything bad they did, and I'd get in trouble if they didn't do their chores. Group projects were the worst because they'd shut down my ideas, then suggest them later. and suddenly it was a great idea. If I spoke up about it being my idea, I'd be accused of trying to steal credit. They always threatened me with knives growing up and even into adulthood. But my parents never believed me, writing it off as sibling rivalry. As adults, they would do things like, if they were driving and we were headed to the mall in my city, I'd point out the entrance and they'd say, "No, that's an apartment building." Even though it was obviously a mall and I was the local who knew the way. It was super weird and frustrating. I don't really talk to my twin anymore. As a result of all their lies and never being believed, I've ended up being the opposite, honest to a fault. Too honest for my own good. Story 39. I had a friend in the Navy who was a compulsive liar, and he wouldn't back down from a lie even after being caught. This guy was from Tennessee. A few of us were talking while working on the flight deck, and he casually stated that he had played football with Peyton Manning. We were speechless for a moment. He wasn't just claiming that he played football for the University of Tennessee. He said he played with Manning. We called him out on it, but he kept lying and even started embellishing the story further. We spent several minutes trying to get him to admit the truth, but he refused to give an inch. This happened around 2006. He had joined the Navy when he was 20 years old. I thought I would finally catch him when I said he would have been about 10 years old when Manning played college football. I saw the smile drop from his face. He knew the jig was up. He sat in stunned silence for about 15 seconds before the smile returned. And he said, "Got you guys. I didn't play with the Peyton Manning. I played with a different guy, a black guy, who played tight end at Tennessee. Y'all are so dumb." Smartphones weren't ubiquitous at the time, so we couldn't immediately debunk his story. But it didn't really matter. At that point, we knew he would never admit to lying. He truly thought we would believe there was a black tight end at Tennessee, also named Peyton Manning. Story 40. There was one girl in school who claimed to have a horse that could run 80 miles per hour. She said it could also jump over 20 feet in the air, with her riding it. But the government supposedly tried to take it away, so she put it down to protect it. No details were given on how she did it. She lived in a single-wide trailer with her parents and about 4 siblings. She told many tales of this amazing, glamorous life she led. Looking back, I think she probably had a pretty sad, boring, or maybe even horrid home life. Now, within my social circle, there is a young lady who very frequently runs into celebrities and major politicians in her everyday life. She could be telling the most mundane story about her week and casually drop in having coffee with Denzel Washington. Or mention how your situation was similar to the time Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez bought her groceries in person in Arizona. Or the time Channing Tatum was her patient in the hospital and had to be discharged early because he wouldn't stop hitting on her. It's so annoying. Oh, she is confirmed as a CNA and works at a hospital, but will invariably describe her occupation as RN, PA, NP, or surgeon in training. The crazy part is, aside from that, she is a nice lady, very warm and friendly, and has a decent number of friends. All her stories are dropped into conversation very casually. It's not like bragging. When she mentioned going to Starbucks and having coffee with Denzel Washington, it was oddly spoken about the same way you or I would mention having grilled chicken for dinner last night. Everyone in her friend circle is aware of her condition and just kind of ignores the ridiculous claims. The only issue is that it's uncertain where the truth ends and the stories begin. Story 41. A kid I knew from school was a liar. He claimed he was adopted, said his dad was going to take us all to see City High live, and even claimed he had organized a minibus. Just all sorts of BS. Several years later, he reached out over Facebook. He told me he had been in the Army but was back home now because he had lost both his legs below the knee due to an IED. He said he had been in a special unit. I was skeptical but played along. His Facebook had pictures and posts that made it look like he genuinely was in the Army, so there was that. He faded away again when he didn't get much attention from me, and I forgot about him for a few more years. Then I remembered and looked him up. There he was, in his profile picture, proudly driving an open-sided Jeep, both legs fully intact. The photo was clearly taken after he had claimed his legs were blown off. Just insane behavior. Story 42. During my freshman year of college, I was watching football with a group of guys, including my roommate from Maryland. We were watching a Baltimore Colts game featuring their rookie running back, Randy McMillian, who had played high school football in Maryland. My roommate started telling a story about playing against McMillian in high school. One of the older guys asked how that was possible, since McMillian was a rookie who had played 4 years in college and my roommate was only a college freshman. My roommate quickly corrected himself, saying he had seen McMillian play in high school. Story 43. I once worked with a woman named Wendy, worth mentioning because every Wendy I've ever met has been a complete nutcase. She was by far the Wendiest Wendy I've ever met, and I honestly think she must have had some kind of personality disorder. Anyway, she told me she used to work for the British CIA when she lived in England, but she couldn't say what she did because of security. Apparently, when she decided to immigrate here, they called her begging her to come back, but she refused. I just let her think I believed it, and she got this excited look in her eye, like she truly thought she had pulled one over on me. She was having the time of her life telling that story. Yeah, because the person who couldn't organize a piss up in a pub and was the biggest gossip I've ever met was totally working for a top-secret organization she didn't even know the name of. Yep, checks out. Story 44. Oh, the stories I could tell you about one Richard Warren Campbell III from Santee, California. He claimed to have a $500,000 trust fund he earned while in special forces in Vietnam, 2 years after we had pulled out. He told other people it was $1 million, but he wouldn't be able to touch it until he turned 30. I was 22. He was 25. He told other people, 35. I could go on and on. Then in 1985, we went to see Dune. Him, another friend, and me, and we all dropped acid. That night, he made his big confession to us. He had bombed out of boot camp. He never had more than 1 or 2 college classes. He even explained why he never had a car. He couldn't drive. He was too paranoid that other cars would be out to get him. Basically, he had a total breakdown. With his confession, we gave him a chance to live an honest life, at least with us. 6 months later, he told me his mother was co-signing a car loan for him. 15 years later, I ran into him at a reunion. He was talking about the math degree he supposedly earned in 1985. He completely forgot that was when he and I were friends. And now, 40 years later, I don't mind doxing him. If he's finally cleaned up his act, wonderful. If not, you need to watch out for this leech. Story 45. My ex-best friend, Missy. We fell out after I found out the money I had loaned her for the water bill went to her new meth habit. She probably still tells these stories. She claimed she had served in the army in Afghanistan. In reality, her father had died, and she inherited his military uniform, coat, and medals from Vietnam. She would tell people it was her own stuff framed on her wall and spin all kinds of stories about it. I know she almost got caught a few times because when I spoke to a guy who stayed on her couch for a few weeks, she told him she didn't like to detail it because it gave her PTSD. I thought, I've known her since she was 11. She's never been in the military in any form. Other lies. Missy is allergic to the sun, so she doesn't have to work outside at Renfest. Missy is also diabetic, so she must eat and take breaks to check her blood sugar, no matter how slammed we were as servers. She even stole a test kit from her then boyfriend and would actually use it. Missy was run over by an ice cream truck. That was me, and I wasn't run over, just flung into a ditch on my bike. Missy was stabbed by her brother 3 times. She was, by a thumbtack. Missy robbed a group of people at a state fair. She actually found a bag of quarters behind a group of preteens on the ground. Missy claimed she ate 44 hits of acid at one time. Take away about 36. I have actually watched her take about 8 in a span of 24 hours at a festival. There are so many more stories. She'd tell people about things we did as kids. And if she embellished, I'd just nod along and laugh, not trying to call her out in front of others. I got sick of the lying, though. When she got the money from her husband for the water bill, she smoked through it. When I asked for it back in front of him, she got put on the spot. Glad our 30-year friendship was worth $200. She's lied like this her whole life. Meth just made it worse. Story 46. Had a boyfriend when I was 18 who lied about working at a garage. He went in hard, leaving me at his flat early in the morning as if he had an early shift, wearing work trousers, and even introducing me to a colleague. What was worse, he started telling me and my parents how poorly they were treating him. It was the garage my parents used, and my mom was getting ready to go speak to them about it. He was finally caught when it turned out that my colleague's husband owned that garage, and she told me they had never heard of him. Story 47. He was Italian but also claimed to be half Cherokee, despite looking as white as Mayo. He said he was a race car driver who witnessed a fellow driver's horrific death and claimed he picked up and held the driver's helmet when the head was thrown from the vehicle. He claimed he could perform exorcisms even though he had only ever attended church and never actually read the Bible. He said he was a spy working for the government and that people were after him because he knew things. He claimed to have incurable cancer and somehow cured it without any medical treatment, allegedly through alcoholism. Later, he simply stopped mentioning it, using it to guilt-trip people who had sympathized with a 10-year-old stage 4 cancer diagnosis. All of these were lies told by my father. These were just the most unbelievable ones. There were hundreds more. He even lied about paying all my bills from my apartment despite me being no contact for years. The truth made him look bad, so lying was his cover. Story 48. I know one guy who loves telling stories and filling the silence. His tales range from getting out of tickets by being witty, to having to register his hands as lethal weapons, to being in absolutely insane situations with cops or random people. One story involved him getting pulled over after doing a Dukes of Hazzard-style stunt in front of a cop, and she supposedly let him go after a witty conversation. The best part is that 90% of the time, if you're around him for more than an hour, he'll retell the same stories, but with drastically different endings. Myself and other friends started giving each other looks, but none of us had the heart to burst his bubble. The second time he told the cop story, it ended with her putting him in handcuffs, then letting him go, but also letting him burn rubber and speed off into the sunset. Honestly, this guy could be a writer with the stuff that comes out of his mouth. I should just start writing it all down. Edit. I just recalled another instance, this one at a dangerous and scary level. A woman I worked with years ago lied about her son dying, accepted donations, and had full-blown Facebook posts and a GoFundMe. Her son eventually came forward and explained that he had gone no contact with her for obvious reasons. She didn't even care that she had been caught and called out. Her reasoning was that since he went no contact, he was dead to her. Story 49. I was living away from my hometown around the time my brother's wife was pregnant with their first child. I stopped in to visit during a short trip to see my mom. I asked her when exactly her due date was. She gave an answer that didn't make sense. When I pressed a bit, she said, "Oh, they changed it." I asked what she meant by changed it. She replied, "It's not 40 weeks anymore, it's only 38. I called her on that. "You know, you can't change gestation, Barbara," I said. She replied, "Well, the doctors here did. I could write a book." She is claimed to need countless surgeries for all sorts of bizarre ailments that seem to magically disappear. One time, she said she was going to the States to see a world-famous surgeon for brain surgery, Dr. John Hopkins. She claimed he has hospitals named after him. You can tell when she's making up a new story. Her eyes get big and barely blink, and her neck gets this big hunch. It's been interesting. Story 50. I had an employee who was a train wreck of lies. One story I caught her in always cracked me up. She claimed she had twin boys stationed in Afghanistan and would frequently tell me and other co-workers about the people they killed over there. One day, she came to a work fundraiser with her husband, and I greeted them. I was giddy to catch her in a lie. While her husband was talking to me, I said, "He must be so proud of his sons being soldiers in Afghanistan." He looked dazed and confused and asked what I meant, so I explained, with all the details she had been telling us for months. She started panicking and insisting that I was lying. By that point, she had caused a ton of issues at work, and this was the last straw. After she went on a rant about me breaking military privacy rules by asking her husband about her sons, I fired her on the spot. As I walked away, I heard her husband say to her, "You've got to stop doing this crap." Story 51. My youngest brother is a sociopath. He tells elaborate lies that are ridiculously easy to refute. Can't keep them straight. And most of the time, there's no reason at all, unless he's just seeking attention. He once told a story about being in the hospital with some deadly heart condition, claiming our dad was in the room crying about almost losing him. My sister was on the phone, looking at our dad's face, clearly not at the hospital. Just wild stuff. He stole a ruby and platinum engagement ring I gave my mom after my divorce and gave it to his girlfriend, claiming he bought it for her. He couldn't explain how I was wearing it in my college graduation picture, long before he was born. We've all given him thousands of dollars, later finding out it was for drugs when he said it was for car repairs, rent, groceries, etc. I think all of us have him blocked now, except our mom. He's a full-on drug user. He lost his wife last year after getting caught sleeping with his best friend's fiance, and now he's basically unable to see his kid while making it everyone else's problem. Last month, he got arrested for DWI with drug paraphernalia and a weapon in the car, and he was mystified that nobody would pay his bail. Story 52. I knew a guy in school who was a terrible liar. He lied about everything. Once, he told me he was late to school on the last day before spring break because his family went on vacation to Italy. But while on the plane, his mom supposedly got a call from the school saying that if he didn't come to school, he couldn't graduate. So, as soon as they touched down in Italy, he was sent back to the US to attend one day of school. After the school day, he would supposedly get on a plane, first class of course, to go back to Italy for spring break. Everyone who heard this just stared at him. Why even lie about that? No one really cares why you're late. He also used to lie to me about where he lived when he needed rides. I grew up poor with a car that barely ran, but when I took him home, he would have me drop him off in a super nice neighborhood. He said it wasn't nice enough for his parents. I later found out I was dropping him off in a random neighborhood, and then another friend would pick him up to actually take him home. It felt insulting. Why waste my time and then try to make it seem like you're better than me in the process? Story 53. A dead best friend. Seriously, we were in the backseat of a car being driven by my boyfriend's best friend, Jay. Admittedly, Jay was driving too fast down a back road, but the way P freaked out was extreme. She threw herself onto the floorboard, practically screaming and shaking. It scared all of us. My boyfriend got Jay to slow down, and eventually, P calmed down. She explained that she was terrified of speeding because her best friend from high school had died the year before in a car accident. We were instantly upset for her and mad at Jeff. A couple of weeks later, another friend, L, found a flyer from a funeral home about it in P's car. While it corroborated her story, it was also odd that it was still in there a year later, and we'd never seen it any other time we'd been in P's car. Flash forward a bit, and P got drunk with us for the first time. But it was so weird. She had one Zika or something and was stumbling everywhere, laughing like a maniac, grabbing everyone. Everything was just exaggerated. It didn't seem real. A few other little things had started adding up, so Elle and I invited P over to my apartment to drink and play cards. I acted as bartender for the evening, mixing drinks for everyone. I put absolutely no alcohol in P's drinks that night, and she was awful. Slurring, giggling, falling over, passing out. Elle and I were like, this chick is full of crap. That's when we started pulling away. Eventually, P realized that her friend group was moving on without her, and a last gasp of something. She showed up and started confessing that her home life had been fine, she hadn't been abused, and she didn't have a dead friend. She said she didn't know how to make friends, so she had made up the story about the friend dying, and even created the flyer herself to make us believe her. Then she disappeared. Later, we met someone who had known her in high school. She had a wonderful family, an older brother we'd never heard about, and was widely known to be a pathological liar who had made up equally ridiculous stories all her life. But yeah, she made up an entire dead friend, with a backstory. Wild. Story 54, I had a boyfriend who seemed totally fine, except he told me that before the age of 20 he had died 7 times. Okay, weird. He went on to tell me that he was working several jobs. He was not. I nearly broke up with him over that, but he claimed he was embarrassed about bias in our small town, so I stupidly agreed to move to the city with him. And we did. He got a job as a manager at a clothing shop instantly. Great. He had to work a lot, but that was okay. We could work it out. I got a job as an assistant manager at a jewelry shop. Everything seemed great, except he would lie about random, bizarre things. That he knew famous people, or that he had won the lottery and given it to a hobo. Just the most random stuff. I figured I could live with the weird things, but then he proposed. We decided to have a dinner to introduce the in-laws. On the day of, he made me breakfast, which he never did. And I got seriously ill, vomiting every few minutes. It was strange. In hindsight, I'm not convinced he didn't poison me. We lived together for a few months. Some other terrible things happened that I'm not ready to talk about. Financial and physical abuse, and so many lies. I eventually found out he was cheating with a minor. Absolutely disgusting. I got out and rebuilt my life while his fell apart. A friend recently saw him working as a sales associate in our hometown. I'm glad I have no plans to go back there. Screw him. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.